From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to this special edition of U.S. Farm Report from tomorrow's Top Producer Seminar in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what we're working on for you over the next 60 minutes. Suffering crop conditions in the northern corn belt, but is there any weather-related fire left in the corn market? The Dicamba debate is only heating up. So what's causing it, and can Dicamba tolerant and non-Dicamba tolerant technologies ever coexist? That's our Farm Journal report. Caring for the land is this man's passion and mission, but he wants to do so on his own. That's our Real Faces of Dairy. And in John's world,
public use and public benefit, are they the same thing?
U.S. Farm Report, brought to you by the dependable, long-lasting Chevy Silverado.
Now for the market-related news, dry conditions taking its toll on crop conditions in some major corn-producing states. USDA's latest crop progress report shows Iowa dropped 6 points. Now 71% of the corn crop is rated good to excellent. Illinois dropping 1 point, now 62% good to excellent. And looking at drought-stricken areas, only 30% of South Dakota's corn crop is in good to excellent shape. Overall, USDA trimmed national ratings by a point. Here's Joe Vaklovic of Standard Grain.
That was an expected decline. Crop conditions generally do decline during this time of year. You know, we generally see our peak in June or early July, and then we kind of deteriorate through harvest. So it's not uncommon to see crop conditions deteriorate. And as a matter of fact, corn conditions are still above the 5-year average. Now,
USDA also shaving a point off its national soybean condition ratings. 61% is good to excellent. State by state, Iowa is down 4 points, Nebraska down 3. But it's pasture and range conditions showing just how dry it is in the northern plains. In South Dakota, 11% of the pasture and range is rated good. None is in the excellent category. And in North Dakota, only 7% is considered good to excellent. A case of atypical BSE found in an 11-year-old Alabama cow. Officials say what's important to note is the animal never entered slaughter channels and poses no risk to food supply or human health. Now, there are two types of BSE, both classical and atypical. This marks only the 5th detection of BSE in the U.S. The case back in 2003 that caused China to shut off U.S. beef shipments, that was classical BSE. Officials say atypical cases don't impact the WTO BSE risk state of the U.S. All right, that's it for the market-related news. Time now to pitch it back to Mike Hoffman in our South Bend studios. Mike, it's July, temperatures are heating up, but the northern plains, they could still use some rain.
Yeah, that's right, Tyne. That area, unfortunately, has seen all these thunderstorm complexes develop east of them and move into the Great Lakes. And so we're seeing our first exceptional drought areas now developing over the northern plains into eastern Montana. You go back a month, and you can see it was already getting pretty bad, so it's been a while. There were pockets farther east, but these have been going away over time. You can see as we move through the last 4 weeks, things have been getting better in the eastern third of the country overall, but it's the far northern plains and a few spots down in Oklahoma and Texas that are a concern as well. So let's go day by day, check out our forecast. You can see as we start Monday, a storm system in the northeast, cold front down along the mid-Atlantic coast and into the southeast as well with some scattered showers and thunderstorms. Cooler, drier air coming into most of the Great Lakes in the northeast behind this system. Of course, your typical afternoon variety monsoon moisture of the southwest, seeing those scattered showers and thunderstorms developing. You'll notice every front that tries to come into the northwest doesn't make it very far. It does start to dive into the northern plains on Wednesday with some spotty showers and thunderstorms. Stationary front in the southeast, same idea. And of course, the afternoon stuff in the southwest. Going on to Friday then, that next system diving into New England again. Cold front down into the Tennessee Valley with scattered showers and thunderstorms as some cooler air once again comes into the Great Lakes. Scattered showers in the far northern area, parts of Montana and the Dakotas, and of course in the southwest. We'll check your longer range forecast in our next half hour.
Thanks, Mike. Well, still to come on this special edition of U.S. Farm Report, our marketing roundtable discussion happens right here from tomorrow's Top Producer Seminar. Jared Creed, Naomi Bloom, and Matt Bennett, they join me next.
U.S. Farm Report on the road at the 2017 Tomorrow's Top Producer Seminar is brought to you by Channel Seedsmanship at Work. Learn more at channel.com.
Welcome back. We have our U.S. Farm Report roundtable discussion here at the Tomorrow's Top Producer Seminar in Nashville, Tennessee. A good crowd. We're excited to be here and in store for a good marketing discussion. Matt Bennett, Jared Creed, Naomi Bloom joined me this weekend. Matt, let's get started. I mean, the markets are focused on weather right now. That's all we're hearing. And it seems like the areas that are getting the rain, they don't necessarily need it.
Absolutely, so what we're seeing is a lot of folks that don't want to get the rain continue to get pounded with rain, and unfortunately it's really having an adverse effect on their crops. Whereas you've got areas, in the Dakotas and northwestern Iowa and in Nebraska that are drying out significantly, and it's really causing a lot of issues and a lot of concerns as to how is this going to play into the national yield on down the road. It's definitely for corn, the prime time here in this time period. For beans, we've probably got a little bit more time to wait on a rain, but the areas that are getting all the rain for beans, it's just devastating the bean crop.
Yeah, but when we look at this weather every week, it's been a weather market, and of course it's that time of year. But how much fireworks do you think are left in this corn market, Jared, when it comes to weather?
Certainly for the next month, at least. I think there's a little bit more going on in the marketplace than just yield. That's obviously the catchy phrase right now, talk about yield, talk about yield. Personally, I don't believe the yield is quite as damaged as most people want to say it is right now. I guess I'd tell you it's 163, 164. And I would also tell you that given today's market environment, $4 corn is overpriced if you got 163, 164 bushel yield, considering you're still well over a 2 billion bushel carryout in that situation. Maybe yield is going to take a back seat several months down the road when we maybe figure out a little bit of a surprise that we lose some harvested acreage. That's probably the first step up after you get over this yield debate.
I mean, do you think corn's overpriced at this point, considering all the problem areas we have been seeing this year, Naomi?
It's fair valued right now because the market is really just uncertain of where this price can go. If you look at the good to excellent category for week 29, we're 64% good to excellent. And if you take a look at this year, compare it to the past 10 years, there are 4 years that are very similar for good to excellent ratings. And in those 4 years, 2 years, yield came out bingo on expected trend line. 1 year it was 5 bushels below, the other year it was 11 bushels below expected trend line. There's a lot of fireworks that can happen yet, and I think the reason that corn has just been holding tight in this forever range-bound pattern is because it's aware that, hey, it could be maybe a little bit closer to trend line than what people would think, but there's a whole lot of discrepancy about how low it can go. And if we are closer to 165 for trend line yields, for yields, that actually cuts carry out to 1.8 billion bushels, and then you actually got a friendly story. You got a reason for the market to rally.
I mean, you're in Illinois, Matt, and I was in Illinois last week, and those growers tell me, listen, it was rough getting the crop in. We kind of trimmed our top and yield off from the very start. Kind of what are you thinking is going on in Illinois at this point with yield?
In Illinois, you've got a definite case of haves and have-nots. What you've got is some folks are going to have a really, really good crop. Now, I don't know if we're going to have 14-type yields. It's going to be really tough to get there because we had so much rain early on, right after we got the crop in the ground. But the problem is, I want to compare it to 2012 just a little bit. In 2012, we had just a perfect growing season at the start. Corn came out of the ground like a rocket. Whenever it was knee-high, it was phenomenal. Problem is, after that, we all know what happened. This year, we had extreme stress, and we've got very similar in parts of Illinois weather to what we had in 2012. That really is killing some of these people are thinking maybe 100 bushel under their last 3-year average. That's a pretty significant drop.
But also in 2012, we had a lot of other key states really get hit. I mean, let's talk about Iowa this year. Crop conditions dropped 6 points. I mean, just this week with corn conditions in Iowa. Is that justified?
Sure. Well, Iowa has 9 districts, east to west, north to south. Northwest district is the headline right now. It's catching a lot of attention. It's too dry, too hot. Then you got to start asking yourself if the eastern part of the state, like they have done the last couple of years, can carry the load. Southwest Iowa's got to be considered a little bit as well, albeit they have much less acres. I think there's one really important piece that has to be labeled here, though. We're talking about a potential market movement based upon a U.S. yield when we're sitting here in the middle of July with pretty much more stocks available for sale from the U.S. and South America farmer than we've ever had before. That is just pure hedging pressure on a board of trade. So anytime we get concerned with these yields, sure, we've raised the prices, but there's a liquid seller right there every single time. And for now, that's keeping a lid on things. If Matt's talking about yield problems in Illinois and that translates into Iowa and the U.S. farmer, international farmer wants to get bulled up and stop selling, sir, there's no problem at all with us moving higher where we are today.
All right, real quick before we go to break, we have a lot more marketing discussion that's going to happen. But real quick, I want to get each of your yield, your national yield. I know we're talking about it a lot, but at this point, what are you going with?
I'm going to just right now say 166 to 167 just because there's too many variables yet to be any more aggressively lower than that.
I just went down to 164.1 here just about an hour ago just because I keep getting griped at.
So that's what it takes?
Make them happier for a minute.
I'm going to say 162.5.
That low?
Yes, that low.
All right, well, if we do have a 162.5 yield, kind of what does that do to price? What price action could we have moving on throughout this year? And what should you do about new crop sales? I mean, we've been so focused on old crop. What should you do about new crop? We'll talk about that when we come back on U.S. Farm Report.
U.S. Farm Report on the road at the 2017 Tomorrow's Top Producer Seminar is brought to you by Channel Seedsmanship at Work. Learn more at channel.com.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Well, we mentioned a yield before we went into break. And Matt, you were at 162.5. Let's say we do hit that. What do you think that does to prices?
Yeah, I think that you're going to have a hard time getting below that in August, no matter how bad the weather is between now and the August report. But if we do print a 162, I think that you're still not going to probably rally above 450, in my opinion, for a lot of the reasons that Jared's talking about. We do have ample stocks. There's no question about that. I think on farther down the road, I also agree with him. I think planted acres is going to come down. I think harvested acres is going to come down long term. So I think that you're going to still have a fair amount of support. I just don't think we're going to skyrocket.
So even with that big of a yield drop, he's just talking 450, considering the stock scenario. So what's your advice to producers right now, not only on old crop, but new crop, when we have a forward from corn?
Well, keep in consideration what we're talking about, the hedging pressure across the world. But look at the U.S. balance sheet and just a quick picture. You know, we've been talking about too high of feed and residual numbers since last August, since the crop tour, really. And now you're seeing the play out of 17, 18 corn exports start to slide lower, as much as maybe 400 or 500 million bushel less than last year. So you put that all in play. I see where Naomi's numbers are coming from, but I have a hard time seeing us getting below a 2 billion bushel carryout with what we know right here today. And with that being said, I think around $4 cash corn for majority of the heart of the Corn Belt, not just harvest delivery, but spring and summer of 18, that's a pretty good cash flow, even if we got maybe a 5% ding in yield across most of those states. So right now, the eye on the prize is looking at more revenue than we're spending, and I think the market's given us some of those opportunities, so have those firm orders in right now. Keep it simple.
But some of the producers I talk to say these prices aren't cutting it right now. So what advice do you have for those producers, Naomi?
Well, for the people who are wondering what to do with old and new crop, unfortunately for the old crop, it's not going to get much better, just because, as these guys are saying, there's too much out there. So you're going to have to get to the point where you sell it, but do be willing to re-own it, and I would even start looking out to re-owning it out to July of next year. And the reason is because with the reduced acres that you have for the wheat in the Dakotas, you are going to have a fight for acres on your hand in the Dakotas where they are going to be tempted to be planting wheat again. That's going to be less corn, that's going to be less soybeans, and that's going to play out into the January timeframe. And so when the USDA finally comes up with all the truth of the numbers, it's in that January report. And then you're going to see the fight for acres happen. And the world is in a situation where ending stocks are trending lower, and if we have a bad situation with the South American crop this winter, this isn't done yet. This is a building base for a longer-term price level. So do re-own anything that you price.
What's your advice for soybeans, though? I mean, we know, look at last year for experience. August, we got some key rains. We had some phenomenal soybean yields, of course, out there. So what's your advice for producers right now when we're not in that August timeframe just yet?
It's really tough for a producer who is in that northern Indiana and northern Ohio area because what are you going to have to sell? I mean, obviously, I think that the crop is hurt in some of these places. What's my advice? It's still early. I mean, soybeans are an August crop. We don't really know a whole lot about yield until then. We know it's been hurt to an extent, and if you do have a hot and dry August, Katie barred the door on this bean market. You could be seeing some real fireworks happen because the bottom line, we all know, demand is quite phenomenal with soybeans. It's really hard to outguess the soybean market, though. So my advice to a producer would be lock in profitable situations and not try to hit the high, because you're not going to hit the high.
Like fireworks as in $12 fireworks?
No, $11.80.
Hey, if you plug in 45, 46 bushel soybean yield and you want to take U.S. exports for 17, 18 to 2.2 billion bushel, 45 can get a lot of people excited, and I think we've only raised 45 2 or 3 times.
Naomi, I know you want to chime
Well,
in here.
absolutely, because if you, again, looking at the math, out of the past 10 years, there have been 4 years where we've been similar situation, and it's either trend line or it's 3 bushels below trend line. 40 high 5 bushel to the acre comes out at 190 million bushels for ending stocks. That's half of what we have, and that is soybean rally.
Real quick, when we look at these cattle markets right now, it's so frustrating because it is not just a supply and a demand story. When we look at the funds and different things, what's your advice for cattle producers today trying to watch these markets?
Good luck. How about that? Awful volatile market.
Yeah.
We're coming off of a record high in open interest. I'm going to take the safe route here and just continue in these volatile times as we're trying to dig ourselves out of some tough ag economy here. Hit the base hits, take the singles, take the doubles. No more of these, buying overpriced replacements and hoping to God you get feeder values to the point that you're going to make some money.
Real quick, dairy prices, heard from dairy producers here, not happy. I mean, we've seen these pressured prices for a few years now. Any light in that tunnel?
Well, export demand is still strong. We've got cheese demand that's hanging in there, and that's keeping the market supported. Outlook right now is for more of a sideways trading pattern, which has been the norm, between $16 to $17 for a while now, because production, we had the production report come out today, it's up 1.7%. So milk is not the problem. Demand is good, so that should keep the market supported, but sideways.
All right, thank you. Well, when we come back, we'll get their closing thoughts. Don't go anywhere. All right, time now for closing thoughts. Matt?
Yeah, I think that a producer needs to keep their emotions in check whenever we've got these volatile markets. Let's look at this from a business-based perspective and just simply lock in some profitability and not try to get cute with the market.
Jared?
Add on to what Matt's saying, brush off the insurance policy again, make sure you know how your revenue flow works, lock in profitable prices, including your crop insurance, and definitely keep your eyes open on 2018 moving forward. Outlook looks pretty prosperous.
Naomi?
Yeah, be ready for any scenario to unfold. Obviously, the outlook right now is more for a friendlier outlook with prices being able to rally, but we know how it works. Any report can come along or any black swan can come along, so be ready for the shoe to drop just in case, but otherwise there's opportunities that are going to be coming into 2018.
All right, thank you all. We appreciate it. Stay with us. John Phipps joins us next.
Visit farmjournalpro.com. Trusted analysis, professional insight. farmjournalpro.com.
Welcome back. Well, as a landowner, John's focused on property rights, and that's the topic of this week's John's World.
Farmers in Iowa are fighting a legal battle to prevent the notorious Dakota Access Pipeline from crossing their land. While the eminent domain issue has been a perennial subject of controversy, the latest skirmishes should concern landowners. A few years ago, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled 5-4 in their famous Kelo ruling that the state could expropriate land not just for public use, but for use that benefits the public, such as economic benefits. This means that using eminent domain for a new factory site is just as legal as for a public park. This ruling prompted many states to tighten up their own rules about taking land. Under our federal system, states can, and I think should have, stricter interpretations of public use. Iowa is in the middle of such a court case which will test their position on property rights. All such cases hinge on what public use means, but in the case of the pipeline, I believe it has been stretched too far. The pipeline is not publicly owned or regulated, and the profits from it do not go to the state. What the Kelo precedent began is the idea that the state can take your property if they think someone else could use it more profitably. When the Iowa Constitution was drawn in 1857, delegates specifically voted against this principle. The concept of public use should not be confused with the public economy. it is not unthinkable that further expansion of this public benefit principle could extend to many other types of developments that promise jobs or tax revenues. It's not, for me, just that such promises are seldom as lucrative as advertised. The greater good is that even when inconvenient, property rights are so crucial to the basis for all our laws and regulations that even small, seemingly beneficial encroachments should be resisted vigorously.
Thanks, John. Well, still to come, tough to control weeds is changing the way producers farm, but using dicamba in season, it's creating quite the debate. So what's the deal with dicamba? That's our Farm Journal report after the break.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast. From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome back to this special edition of U.S. Farm Report from tomorrow's Top Producer Seminar in Nashville, Tennessee. We have much more ahead. The dicamba debate that has farmers on both sides. He's a Wisconsin steward who cares just as much for the land and environment than he does his animals. We're in the land of cheese for our real faces of dairy. And a tough question about crop failure and customer support. Now for the headlines. We're less than a month away when NAFTA renegotiations officially kick off, but the Trump administration already making their priorities clear. Officials from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico set to meet in Washington, D.C. starting August 16th. While short on specifics, the Trump administration says it's setting a major objective to reduce the trade deficit during NAFTA renegotiations. The U.S. Trade Rep's office says since the onset of the trade pact in 1994, the trade balance with Mexico has gone from a $1.3 billion surplus to a $64 billion deficit. Well, drought and stagnant farm prices are not helping the rural economy. The latest Rural Main Street Index saw its largest one-month decline in almost 9 years since the Great Recession of 2008. The July survey of rural bankers from Creighton University says after a couple months of positive movement, confidence in rural America is plummeting. Loan volumes surging to their second highest reading in the survey's history. And on average, bankers think roughly 1 in 6 grain farmers will see negative cash flows this year. All right, that's it for the news. Let's pitch it back to Mike Hoffman in the studios. Mike, I know you have our longer range forecast now. Do you see any major changes in our weather pattern?
Well, Tyne, that's an easy one. No. The same pattern. We've seen this for a while this summer, and I don't see it changing. We have these troughs that develop into the Great Lakes. You can see we're going to once again for early this week into New England, and the ridge tries to come back eastward, tries to heat things up for a couple of days, and then you can see the trough kind of digs in again. Now, I will say that the trough is making a little bit of inroads into the northwest, which means you might start to cool down a little bit and get a few showers in there as we head through this week, something we'll be watching. But even on into next weekend, you can see the ridge kind of builds back toward the west coast again, and the trough develops in the northeast. So here's the way things look over the next 30 days. My forecast: above normal from the mid-Atlantic coast, Georgia, South Carolina, all the way through the Plain States, and then most of the northwest and the west coast. Below normal for the Four Corner region, southward, and also for parts of the northeastern lakes and the northeast. Above normal rainfall in the southeast, southern Mississippi Valley, southwest, unfortunately below normal in the drought areas of the northern plains.
Thanks, Mike. Well, finding new ways to combat glyphosate-resistant weeds has become a way of life for some farmers. This year, those farmers were approved to use another tool, new dicamba formulations over the top of soybeans. But it was that move that has some farmers frustrated, while others are singing the product's praise. And that's this week's Farm Journal report.
Yeah, these beans are starting to flower.
Strolling through shin-high soybeans,
I'm very happy so far here.
Illinois farmer Ed Vitko has a refreshing view.
We sprayed approximately 1,200 acres of soybeans with dicamba.
And he says those 1,200 acres are the cleanest he's seen in years.
I am very ecstatic with the weed control that I've gotten.
Vitko sprayed BASF's new dicamba formulation called Ingenia.
I had 0 issues with dicamba injury, 0.
But 100 miles south, Jeremy Wolf has a different view. He started seeing injury from dicamba showing up in early June.
We were the only ones spraying beans that day. They'd had a load of dicamba went out earlier that day, multiple loads in between us, but we still got it.
The verdict? Tank contamination.
It was consistent across all the fields we sprayed, so it's pretty clear.
And Wolf says from early June through mid-July, the issue only heated up.
But this is something that's not new for us in Illinois. We've actually seen dicamba symptoms virtually every year we've used the product in this state, which is now close to 50 years.
Weed specialist Aaron Hager says he's had more calls and questions about dicamba in the last 30 days than ever before.
I think there's a lot of just general ignorance about dicamba. Not a lot of people that are using it now have used this product for many, many years.
A lot of people are looking for it because they've never looked for it before.
Ferry says some soybean leaves are curling this year due to weather stress, not dicamba. But when it's injury from dicamba, it can show up anywhere from 7 to 21 days after exposure.
We're seeing things that are probably encompassing virtually all off-target factors. Those would include physical drift, those would include movement by vapors, whether it be through volatility. Maybe it also could occur and be moving through this process of the inversion conditions.
And it's not just Mother Nature. Another culprit, farmers using older formulations of dicamba.
We've had a lot of instances so far where a lot of the investigations clearly would point to movement that was a dicamba product applied in corn.
But Hager says even the new dicamba products aren't accident proof.
But low volatility and no volatility are distinctly different. And when you have products that are low volatility and you couple that with an extremely sensitive species like soybeans, typically, again, it's not a matter of if you're going to see symptoms of exposure, it's typically how extensive and what the magnitude is going to be.
However, in Ferry's experience, damage is minimal on beans still in the vegetative stage.
But I've seen a lot of beans that I think it's going to have no effect on, other than maybe the nerves of the farmer who saw the cupping.
So right now we're in a field of Extend soybeans, and you can see these in rows. They did not apply dicamba here because it's so close to the grass. They say this is glyphosate resistant water hemp, and this is the reason they need dicamba right now.
Considering the need and with the number of dicamba damage complaints on the rise, companies like Monsanto and BASF are taking note.
So we're looking at drift retardant agents and nozzles and clean out procedures for growers. We're going to be working with states to make sure that the off-label products aren't used, and that's going to be key. And then we're going to look at what we can do to help growers be more aware of temperature conditions and inversions. So lots to do, but I'm absolutely convinced that these are going to be great tools and they're going to be important for farmers.
BASF says they're aware of issues in the field, already deploying more than 400 field reps to answer questions and concerns. They're also putting money behind getting the right tools in farmers' hands.
One of the key ingredients of that good experience is, from a proper application standpoint, is to utilize the right nozzle. And so what BASF has done is we've invested heavily and have distributed those nozzles to our customers. Over 600,000 nozzles to date BASF has purchased and given to our customers.
Both BASF and Monsanto have boots on the ground today, working to find solutions for next year. And while Wolf is frustrated with drift today, he doesn't want to see the weed-fighting tool go away.
We need this technology going forward, so let's address the issues head on and figure out what we need to do, what's causing these problems.
And while the answer to that question isn't clear-cut, farmers like Vitco hope the product's good outweigh the bad, making dicamba a viable option for years to come.
Now, both Ferry and Hager say it's essential for growers to follow the label, as this is a 2-year conditional license. But when I asked Ferry how this compares to the rollout of Roundup, he told me it was much worse in the 90s, with several fields fried from farmers forgetting where they planted the new technology. Up next, John Phipps.
Crop problems elsewhere. Good thing or not?
With market prices constantly changing, it's important to know where current prices stand. Get market prices delivered right to your mobile phone. Just text Markets 8 to 31313 to get started.
Welcome back. Well, it's been a difficult year for some farmers, with crops toast from not enough rain, and that could impact the crop balance sheet, and that's drawing some criticism from viewers.
Your call is very important to us. Please hold.
Keith La Rochelle has a criticism for row crop farmers. Such excitement and joy in the row crop community as of late about the prospects for hot and dry weather in the western corn belt that, if it materializes, will hurt and in some cases wipe out crops, thereby lowering national yields and driving up prices. My comment on this It's sick and disgusting that we grow too much of these commodities, wasting all those inputs and then hoping and praying for bad weather or a natural disaster, but on someone else's fields, of course. So my crops will be worth more. I'm sorry, but I don't have much respect for row crop farmers anymore, at least the ones with this mindset. How did we get to this place in this country? And I suppose other countries as well that are large-scale producers. Keith, thank you for writing. Let me be as precise as possible in my answer. My sense is that all farmers share to some degree this emotional cross-current regarding crop problems. The first thing to keep in mind is that, like other random calamities, we are all aware it's a matter of luck. And the older you are, the more likely you recall there was a time when your fields were unlucky. I don't think many of us are glad of a drought elsewhere, but we recognize it as a big risk we all must endure equally. Oddly enough, the existence of a government-subsidized crop insurance tends to dampen our empathy. Virtually all farmers in the northern plains have coverage, so these apparent losses are at least partially offset. Safety nets diminish sympathy. Think about how many people think about those on welfare. Regardless, we have no way of knowing at the beginning of the season how much supply and demand there will be, so we all take our best guess. If it seems like we are rejoicing in the misfortune of others, that may be an extreme interpretation of our relief of being able to see higher returns during a period of declining net farm income. The competitive nature of capitalism can seem ugly and self-centered, especially in commodities where all of us are producing exactly the same product. It is a balancing act to reconcile our economic rules of engagement with our moral beliefs. Those farmers who do so with humility and compassion lift our whole profession.
Very true. Thanks, John. And if you have a comment on this topic, you can email John. That's mailbag@usfarmreport.com. Well, up next, we're headed to the land of Wisconsin, where it's one dairyman's mission to care for the land. That's next on U.S. Farm Report.
Get the roots your crops need by getting Radiate first. Visit lovelandproducts.com/radiate. See your CPS dealer today. U.S. Farm Report, brought to you by Balchem, standing beside you for 50 years, bringing real results to the dairy industry. Now, through the Real Faces of Dairy project, you can share your story at realfacesofdairy.com.
Well, soil seems like a long way from the milk aisle, but one Wisconsin dairyman is making caring for the land a top priority for producing a top product, and it's turning into a partnership between rural and urban working together. Betsy Gibbon introduces us to a Waunakee, Wisconsin producer, Jeff Endress, in this month's Real Faces of Dairy.
For Jeff Endress, the responsibility of a good producer goes further than just working with cattle.
We always need to be striving and doing things and looking for new ideas that help with water quality.
It starts in the soil. His perspective runs in the family, passed down through the generations from Jeff's grandfather, who made his own conservation plan in the 1940s.
What, do you got herd health going on yet?
Now this fourth-generation farmer is making sure the land will see longevity well past his daughter Sarah.
In order for that to happen, we need to be good stewards of the land, be progressive and innovative with our new technologies.
It's more than a thought, but an effort.
I think you have so much more to gain by being out in front and leading it and being proactive and looking for the new ideas.
Jeff has taken steps to preserve water quality and get others involved, so regulations don't regulate farmers out of business.
You regulate a farmer, now you've taken away a number of options that we may never have even thought of before.
He founded a group called Yahara Pride Farms in 2011. He lives within the Yahara watershed, a 540 square mile watershed now threatened by runoff, urban stormwater, and wastewater. Unlike the recent battle in Des Moines, Iowa, where it was a rural versus urban battle over runoff, the city of Madison and other communities are collaborating with farmers, environmental services, and residents to manage the problem, showing rural and urban interests can coexist.
That's really unique and really key for this to be successful in the future.
Producers like Chuck Rip with Rip's Dairy Valley also lives in the watershed. He joined the Yahara Pride Farms effort too.
The dairy farmers are very progressive and aggressive, so we'll make the moves that we need for us to be able to stay profitable and to be able to stay in business for generations to come.
In addition to the collaboration, a project to reduce phosphorus over a 20-year period was created. Financial contributions are given to farmers for stormwater retention ponds, harvestable stream buffers, strip tillage, and manure injection.
We've got a couple of practices that we brought to the watershed, and the county are supporting cost share programs for farmers to upgrade equipment so they can actually do those practices.
Participating farmers document confidential data, the farm's energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, measuring to see what they can improve and what they're doing well.
That took time. We would get maybe 30 or 40% of the data from them on what was happening out in the fields. And in 2016 now, we just are finishing up our phosphorus report. We had 100% participation with the farmers enrolled in our program.
On his own operation, Jeff is stockpiling and composting liquid and solid manure together. It's a sustainable way to manage manure, creating a product that's perfect for farm fields.
We do see a little bit of a yield bump where we're using the compost.
And it's not a runoff risk if used correctly.
It's no longer a threat for runoff. It actually absorbs moisture.
A pride in his farm, now reaching beyond the barn. Reporting in Waunakee, Wisconsin, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. Well, Jeff encourages farmers who want to focus more on environmental efforts to do something as simple as share practices they're doing with customers or even get involved in local government. Well, when we come back, it's this week's Tractor Tales.
Tractor Tales is brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new.
Welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week, we're going to feature a California tractor for you that's found a new home in northern Missouri. This 1959 D17 worked hard in the cotton fields and pecan orchards for many years. Now this Alice Chalmers is retired and lives the life of parades and local drives.
They started building what they called the black bar grill tractor, which started about somewhere mid-1959 through mid-1960. This tractor originally come from California. It was used on a farm that they raised cotton and pecans. So I doubt that they used the high crop tractor around the pecan trees, so it was probably used in the cotton fields. There was evidence that it was used for a cultivator tractor. When I bought it, there were some clamps. They made a cultivator, a rear cultivator, and a front cultivator. The front cultivator had the sweeps, used hydraulic cylinders. There were clamps along the frame that would have held the hydraulic lines up out of the way. So Alice Chalmers built what they called a farm crane on the back of it that you'd use for lifting up heavy things. I restored it a few years ago. I take it to quite a few shows and I get quite a bit of interest in it because you don't see many set up just like that. That's a factory Alice Chalmers weight. Now they weren't on the tractor when I bought it. I've added them since. There's a lot of soil that a D17 will pull a four bottom plow in. Around here it's a pretty good test. We've got some pretty rough ground and it's a 3-bottom plow around here, but you get to pulling a 4-bottom plow out of the ground and that front end gets pretty light. So that's where those weights really come in. I think that's the biggest thing, finding them and then hunting for the parts it takes to make them go, you know. We'll keep around for a while, I'm sure.
Thanks so much. Well, this week's Country Church Salute goes to St. John's the Baptist Catholic Church in Landick, Ohio. They're celebrating their 150th anniversary this year. The church tells us today the active parish is home for 239 families. Our thanks to Andrea Renner for sharing their story. All right, stay with us. We have From the Farm photos next. Welcome back. Well, I know we're in the middle of hay season, so that means many of you are putting in a hard day's work.
Jim Shandorf is in Dorr, Michigan. He and his son were busy putting up hay this week. He says alfalfa has been good to excellent, and they're currently spraying a third cutting for leafhopper. And Austin Weaver is in Jasper, Missouri. He says the crops are looking pretty good, but everything will be harvested late due to the rains they had in June. Also, if you're wanting to help farmers and ranchers who are still trying to recover from the wildfires this spring, you're running out of time. It's part of Farm Journal's $1 Million Wildfire Relief Challenge, where Farm Journal is teaming up with the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. Just go to wildfirerelieffund.org. Well, that's all the time we have this weekend from the special edition of U.S. Farm Report from Nashville, Tennessee. We hope you'll tune in next week from the studios as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report, America's longest-lasting news program for farmers, is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest-lasting pickups. U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.